call it Tales. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Isto. You've reached chapter 14 of Tarot Tales, a weekly gathering where I tell a little-known fairy tale based on a randomly drawn tarot card from the week prior. Those of you that were with me last week know that this week we're talking about the King of Cups. It's another Royal Cup card, which is definitely in the energy for this season's shows. Now, this card itself has a lot of the same principles that we already learned about with the Queen of Cups, this kind of feeling of regality. Cups, remember, are this kind of watery feeling, this feeling of emotions. In a normal deck of cards, they correspond to the hearts. So we're living in that same realm, the kind of emotional maturity space. And I've also learned that as we slowly move our way up from an ace to the king, we are slowly kind of progressing through kind of mastery, as it were, of that kind of idea. So the king, unfortunately, does represent kind of the highest part of this suit. And so it kind of means this absolute completion. And the ways in which it represents itself is like security, emotional stability, being a really good partner to someone else, being able to kind of have your stuff unlocked so you're able to be there for the other person. However, if we flip it around, as we always know, that means that we're not quite hitting that. There's some kind of insecurity, some kind of repression, something that's preventing you from being able to like fully let go and commit in the ways that you want to for yourself and for other people. I like this idea of repression. I like this idea of denial and emotional immaturity in general. I will be very curious to know what you all think of the theme that I pulled for the story. But before we get to that, let's talk some beverages. I drew this really cute fish that looks like a blue goldfish, and I'm really excited about it. But we got to turn him upside down because that's what we're doing for this card. And I got a little lazy this last week, mostly because I wanted to try a whole bunch of different kinds of sake, and I imagined a lot of you hadn't tried a whole bunch. So this week's cocktail was not really a cocktail so much as it was just sake. I bought 3 different kinds that were recommended to me, and what I have here in this little goblet is sparkling sake, which is incredible. So I hope some of you are joining me with that. And then for those of you that don't drink, I have a recipe, which is just kind of like a spicy little shot that I've called the Elixer of Life. So I hope some of you are enjoying that in the future or the present. Regardless of whether or not you are joining me with a drink, for simply being here at this video, to you, I say cheers. God damn, that's good. All right. Now, before I get started, quick request from all of you, ways to help me out as I'm trying to grow this art project. If you could like this video, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to my channel on this account and as many Google accounts you have access to. And if you'd like to be notified when new videos come up, you can hit the little bell and that will send you a personal email. You can also look below in the description to find a number of different ways to stay in touch as it suits your life. Thank you for being here. All right. Chapter 14. The story of the man who did not wish to die. Long, long ago, there lived a man called Centauro. He had inherited a small fortune from his father and lived on this, spending his time carelessly without any serious thoughts of work till he was about 32 years of age. Sounds lovely. Then one day, without any reason, the thought of death and sickness came to him. The idea of falling ill or dying could not be removed from his mind. He was obsessed. I should like to live, he said to himself, till I'm 500 or 600 years old at least, free of all sickness. Man's life is so short. He wondered whether it was possible, by living very simply and frugally henceforth, to prolong his life as long as he wished. He knew there were many stories in ancient history of emperors who had lived 1,000 years. And there was Princess Yamada, who, it was said, lived to the age of 500. So we'll pause real quick because we're going to talk a little bit about longevity in general. But I do want to state that I tried really hard. I could not find a Princess Yamato. So anybody watching this in the future, if you know who that person is, please send me a message. I'm so curious. But I did find lots of instances of really old tales of ancient emperors that lived several thousand years. So none that were specifically Japanese emperors, but lots of historical texts. So that kind of checks out. But it got me thinking, like, what's our deal in terms of like recorded life? And so that led me down this little rabbit hole. So I've drawn you kind of, little baby dog all the way up to dead person. So a couple fun facts about this. All 10 of the longest living people on record in like modern times are women. Shout out to women. And the oldest woman ever was a woman named Jeanne Calment, with at the age of 122.5. She was French, and apparently she would have one cigarette after dinner every single day because her husband made her, and she cut it out, I think, at like her 110th birthday and made it to 122.5. Go figure. And then the oldest man is a man named Jiroemon Kimura. I could be mispronouncing that, probably am. He was Japanese and he made it to 116. Now, most modern scientists seem to think that we would tap out around the age of 127, that's the longest that we could extend human life in reality. But there's a lot of things that we keep getting wrong about this. For instance, I learned that we used to think that human cells were infinite, that they never died. And there was a scientist in the 1960s with the last name Hayflick that proved that through the process of cell division, the telomeres that are at the end of this these chromosomes, I'm gonna guess chromatids are the legs. Biology. The telomeres that are at the ends of these, they shorten every time a cell divides through mitosis, and the shorter they get, eventually they just can no longer reproduce, and that tends to indicate how long an animal can live, which is why we're landing on the number like 127-ish. And the only other thing that is interesting about this is that currently scientists think that cancer cells are immortal. Those are all the fun facts I have for you about longevity. 107 years. Let's make it happen. Oh, God, no. Sentaro had often heard the tale of a Chinese king named Shinoshiko. He was one of the most powerful rulers in Chinese history who built the famous Great Wall of China. He had everything in the world he could wish for. But in spite of all of his happiness and the luxury and splendor of the court, the wisdom of his counselors, and the glory of his reign, he was miserable because he knew that one day he must die and leave it all. When Shinoshiko went to bed at night and then rose in the morning, the thought of death was always with him. He could not get away from it. If only he could find the elixir of life, then, he said to himself, he would be happy. All right, cool. We're doing some fast and loose vocab words right off the bat. So, this emperor, I could not find the name Shinoshiko anywhere. I'm unclear why that was associated here, but the actual emperor that built the original Great Wall of China was a man named Qin Shi Huang. Apologies for pronunciation. And a couple fun facts about him. So, first of all, he was the one that invented the term emperor. Uh, he was alive around 230 BCE, and he was the first emperor of China because he was able to bring together all of these different warring states, which was called the Warring State period, and unite them in a common country. And then, as he went through that, he invested in a number of different public works, including the Great Wall of China, which is beautifully drawn here. I mean, my skills are just going through the roof. But despite how accurate this drawing actually is, the Great Wall of China that you may know in your mind is mostly built from the Ming Dynasty. There's very little that is left that was originally built. The other big public work that he built was a city-sized mausoleum. If you've ever seen those kind of terracotta soldiers, they're from that mausoleum. The other fun things about him was that, well, fun's not really the right word. As a part of bringing together all of these different warring states, he kind of crushed the ideas that were going around the countryside at that time. So it was before that period was called the 100 Schools of Thought, and then he banned a whole bunch of books and started burning a whole bunch of them so he can consolidate a whole bunch of power in different parts of thought. So this was like around the time that Confucianism came about. Clamped all that down to grab some power. The other thing that he was really fascinated with, and that's actually really cool and represented in the story, is he was obsessed with the idea of the elixir of life. That is true. And he went to this island called Zifu, and apparently he went there 3 times because he thought that there might be the story or the solution for the elixir of life on that island. And apparently there are like inscriptions of his that list it there. Anyway, isn't that fun? I thought that was so cool. All right. Shinoshiko is the name we will continue to use, but this image is actually from the actual emperor's, illustrations that I could find. All right. The emperor called a meeting of his courtiers and asked them if they could find the elixir of life. One courtier, named Jofuku by name, said that far away across the seas there was a country called Horizon, and that certain hermits lived there who possessed the secret of the elixir of life. The emperor ordered Jofuku to set out for the land of Horizon and to bring him back a vial of the magic elixir. He gave Jofuku one of his best junks, which is a Chinese sailboat, fitted it out for him, and loaded it with great quantities of treasure and precious stones for Jofuku to take as presents to the hermits. Jofuku sailed for the land of Horizon, but never returned to the waiting emperor. But ever since that time, Mount Fuji has been said to be the fabled land and the home of hermits who had the secret elixir. Okay, we have to pause again because this is just too wild and interesting. So we're going to bring our emperor back up here. So first of all, Jofuku is the Japanese name for the Chinese Shufu. Again, apologies for pronunciation, who lived on that island that the emperor went to go visit a number of different times. So we just heard a very PG version of this story. Apparently, Jofuku went off in that junk, but he didn't take precious stones with him. He requested that he get 300 boys and girls that were virgins, and then sailed the seas for a number of years. Sailed, came back, and the emperor was like, "Where's my elixir of life?" And he was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. See, what happened was we ran into this giant sea monster," which I drew myself. We ran into this giant sea monster, and we couldn't get past him. So what I need you to do now is I need you to give me hundreds of archers, send them in the ship with me, and then I'll come back with the elixir of the life. And the emperor was like, "Yeah, cool." And then Jofuku never showed up again. And legend has it that the island that he sailed to was Japan, which was populated, but he brought a lot of different ideas to the island of Japan, like medicine and farming, and is actually worshipped. I was reading that he was worshipped or revered for the innovations that he brought therein, which I thought was super cool, including the fact that there's a Shufu research center that still exists as a part of Japan today. So, anyway, that's the little backstory we got going on. Jofuku, you sneaky devil. Okay. Now, Sintaro was determined to set out to find those hermits on the Isle of Japan near Mount Fuji, and if he could, to become one, so that he might obtain the water of perpetual life. So he left his home to the care of relatives and started out on his quest. He traveled through all the mountainous regions of Mount Fuji, climbing to the tops of the highest peaks, but never a hermit did he find. At last, he decided to go to the shrine of Jofuku, who was worshipped as the patron god of hermits in the south of Japan. Again, that's not entirely accurate. Sintaro reached the shrine and prayed for 7 days, entreating Jofuku to show him the way to a hermit life so that he could find what he so desperately wanted, eternal life. At midnight on the 7th day, Sintaro knelt at the temple, and then the door of the innermost shrine flew open, and Jofuku appeared in a luminous cloud, calling to Sintaro, "Your desire is a very selfish one, and cannot be easily granted. You think that you would like to become a hermit to find the elixir of life? Do you know how hard a hermit's life is? A hermit is only allowed to eat fruits and berries and the bark of pine trees. A hermit must cut himself off from the world so that his heart may become as pure as gold and free from every earthly desire. After following all of these strict rules, the hermit ceases to feel hunger or cold or heat, and his body becomes so light that he can ride on a crane or a carp and can walk on water without getting his feet wet. You, Sintaro, are fond of good living in every comfort. You are not like an ordinary man. You are exceptionally idle and more sensitive to heat and cold than most people. You would never be able to go barefoot or to wear only one thin dress in the wintertime. Do you think that you would ever have the patience or the endurance to live a hermit's life?" Well, in answer to your prayer, I will help you in another way. I will send you to the country of perpetual life, where death never comes and the people live forever. And saying this, Jofuku put into Sintaro's hand a little crane made of paper, telling him to sit on its back and it would carry him there. Sintaro looked at the crane in his hand with wonder and confusion, till the crane started to grow. It grew and grew and grew until it was large enough for him to ride on it without any discomfort. It then spread its wings, rose high into the air, and flew away over the mountains right to the sea. Sintaro was at first quite frightened, but he slowly grew accustomed to the swift flight through the air. On and on they went for 1,000 miles. The bird never stopped for rest or food, but then again it was a paper bird, and doubtless did not require such things. But strangely enough, neither did Sintaro. And after several days, they reached an island. As soon as Sintaro got down from the bird's back, the crane folded up of its own accord and flew into his pocket once again. Sintaro walked around the country and through the town. Everything was quite strange and different from his own land. Both the land and the people seemed so prosperous, so he decided that it would be good for him to stay there, and he took up lodging at one of the hotels. And in this way, Sintaro obtained his great wish and became a resident in the land of perpetual life. Within the memory of all the islanders of the Isle of Perpetual Life, no man had ever passed there, and sickness was a thing unknown. But priests had come from India and China and told them of a beautiful country called Paradise, where happiness and bliss and contentment fill all men's hearts, but its gates could only be reached by dying. This mythology had been handed down from generation to generation, but none knew exactly what death was, except that it led to paradise. Instead of having a great dread of death, they all, both rich and poor, longed for it as something good and desirable. They were all tired of their long lives and wished to go to paradise. Sintaro found himself in the land of topsy-turvydom. He had wished to escape from dying. He had come to the land of perpetual life with great relief and joy, only to find that the inhabitants themselves, doomed never to die, would consider it bliss to achieve death. What he considered poison, these people ate as good food. Whenever any merchants from other countries arrived, the rich people rushed them to buy poisons. These they swallowed eagerly, hoping for death to come so that they might go to paradise. Vainly they tried to imagine what death could be like. The wealthy would have given all of their monies and goods if they could but end their lives. Without any change, to live on forever seemed to these people wearisome and sad. In the chemist shops, there was a drug in constant demand. After using it for 100 years, it's supposed to turn your hair gray and bring about disorders of the stomach. Sintaro was astonished to find that the poisonous globefish was served up in restaurants as a delicate dish, and hawkers in the street went about selling sauces made of Spanish flies. He never saw anyone ill after eating these horrible things. Okay, so we're going to take a quick pause because we just did a little name dropping in terms of animals. So first things, I never realized hawker is the term for those people that will like throw out a bed sheet and then put wares on them to like sell. It's like the kind of, they can grab the bag real quick and then run off. That's what a hawker is. But we were talking about two poisonous animals, so it's our first double feature vocab word for this for this book. The first one is the globefish, which you may have heard of, otherwise known as the pufferfish. A couple fun facts about the pufferfish. There is a specific breed of pufferfish that David Attenborough called the greatest artist of nature, because they would create these really intricate patterns that were much more beautiful than the Sharpie on this cardboard that they would use to try and attract mates into their home. The other thing that's really interesting is that I put under here this word tetroodonti. Apologies to the Latin speakers here, but that's actually the name of the actual pufferfish's family. That refers to tetra, four teeth, donti, because they have four prominent teeth, as do all of the other species within the family, that they use to bite down on mollusks and crustaceans, which is the primary thing that they eat, which I did not know. The other thing that you may know about the pufferfish is that it is super poisonous. And if you've heard of it, the English word is fugu. And it is indeed very poisonous. If you eat it and you are poisoned, it is more poisonous than cyanide. It deadens the tongue, the lips. You go into a spell of dizziness and vomiting, and then eventually all of your muscles freeze up, and then you go into a state of paralysis. Now, the fun thing about the way you die, if you die from pufferfish, is actually that your diaphragm freezes, and so you suffocate because the diaphragm can't do the contractions that are necessary for you to breathe. Isn't that cool? I should say that I saw a lot of information indicating that eating pufferfish is highly, highly regulated in Japan now. You have to get like special permits and everything. So You do you with the fugu. um, and then Spanish flies, if you've heard of it, you may have heard of it as an aphrodisiac. And that is actually because it was considered an aphrodisiac for it was ground down, specifically this part of the Spanish fly, which is also known as a blister beetle, called a cantharidin, which they would excrete and use as a way of attracting their mates. Now, this could be distilled and then put into perfumes as an aphrodisiac, but if you eat it in too large of a dose, it can definitely be very poisonous. They're actually called blister beetles because it can like burn and cause blisters on your, I don't know. I don't know why I'm assuming blisters are coming up on your lips, but I guess wherever you would get this poison. If you were to actually die, then it would manifest itself as intense organ failure. And the final fun fact that I have for you today is that for the Spanish fly, they think that maybe that is actually what killed George Washington, because he was treated with Spanish flies to treat his epiglottis, and then he died. So, you know, for that citizenship test, you just keep that in mind. All righty. Sintaro was delighted. He said to himself that he would never grow tired of living, and that he considered it profane to wish for death. He was the only happy man on the island. He set himself up in business and never dreamed about going back to his old life. But as years went by, things did not go as smoothly. He had heavy losses in business, and several times some affairs went wrong with his neighbors, and this caused him great annoyance. Time passed by like the flight of an arrow for him, for he was busy from morning until night, and 300 years went by like that, until he slowly began to wish that he could see his old country again. Without variance, his life felt dull and boring. So, Sintaro now wished to escape from the country of perpetual life, and brought Jofuku back into his thoughts, prayed for the saint to bring him back to his own land again. No sooner did he pray than the paper crane popped out of his pocket and grew so that he could climb aboard again. Once more, the bird grew and grew until he could fly away, and as he did so, the bird spread its wings and set sail specifically to sea towards Japan. However, such is the folly of man's nature that Sintaro looked back and immediately regretted all that he had left behind. He tried to stop the bird in vain. The crane continued for thousands of miles across the ocean. And then a storm came, and the wonderful paper crane got damp, crumpled up, and fell into the sea. Sintaro fell with it. Very much frightened at the thought of being drowned, he cried out loudly to ask for Jofuku to save him. He looked round, but there was no ship in sight. He swallowed a large quantity of sea water while gasping for air. While he was thus struggling, he kept himself afloat until he saw a monstrous shark floating towards him, with its huge mouth open, ready to devour him. Sintaro was paralyzed with fear and screamed out for Jofuku to come and rescue him! Lo and behold, Sintaro was awakened by his own screams, to find that during his long prayer at the temple of Jofuku, he had fallen asleep before the shrine, and that all his extraordinary and frightful adventures had been only a wild dream. He was in a cold perspiration with fright and utter bewilderment. Suddenly, a bright light came towards him, and Jofuku stood before him once more. I have permitted you in a dream to see the land of perpetual life, but you grew weary of living there and begged me to allow you to return to your native land so that you might die. I tested you, allowed you to drop in the sea, and then sent a shark to swallow you up. Your desire for death was not real, for even at that moment you cried out loudly and shouted for help. It is also vain for you to wish to become a hermit or to find the elixir of life. These things are not for you. Your life is not hard enough. It is best for you to go back to your paternal home and to live a good and industrious life. Never neglect to keep the anniversaries of your ancestors, and make it your duty to provide for your children's future. Thus will you live a good old age and be happy. But give up on the vain desire to escape death, for no man can do that. And by this time you have surely found out that even when selfish desires are granted, they do not always bring happiness. In this book, I give you there are many precepts good for you to know. If you study them, you will be guided in the way I have pointed out for you. And with that, Jofuku disappeared. Sentaro took the lesson to heart. With the book in his hand, he returned to his old home, and giving up all of his old vain wishes, tried to live a good and useful life, and to observe the lessons taught him in the book. And he and his house prospered thereafter. The end. So I like this story for this idea of emotional maturity for a number of different reasons. This idea of being afraid of death, like, is natural. It's very human, but and 32 trying to avoid it is such an interesting concept and idea. And I also find it very interesting that when he goes to the island of perpetual life and he meets all of these people, they so desperately desire to die so that they can go to paradise. And it's kind of this idea of different mythologies, different religious beliefs of spirituality and livelihood overcoming the ways that you are looking at things. And ultimately, he finds his way at the end of this by having a kind of guided path to focus on and accepting what is going to come. And so in this story, I feel like we kind of go full circle in terms of the general acceptance and the emotional maturity of the way that you both live your life and think about death as you move. Do you buy it? No, maybe. I'm also so curious to know what the book is. I wonder if it's like the Tao Te Ching, or what it might be that Jofuku is handing over to Sentaro at the end. I love the idea. Anyway, thank you for listening. I love these Japanese stories. This one, it's so simple. It's like there's not a whole lot going on, but at the same time, there's a lot going on. My favorite chapter from book one was chapter 3, The Mirror of Matsuyama, because I just thought that one was so beautiful as well. So anyway, my gratitude for this week, first and foremost, shout out to Hannah Adrian. Thank you for that last minute crane hookup. Well done. But in terms of thinking about this idea of emotional maturity, I was really thinking about the people that inspire me. And I've given a lot of thanks to different people. And so I really kept coming back to this one person who just really, every time I see them, they just blow me out of the water in terms of the work that they've been doing on themselves. My friend Charlotte, each time I get to meet with you, you have done more thought and work on yourself and the ways that you want to develop. And it really, really pushes me to want to be a better person and really inspires me in those ways. And so if you ever see this, I just want to let you know how meaningful and inspirational it is for me. So thank you for working on yourself for inspiration for all of us. And for the next week, we will be taking a break. But the week following, we're coming back the week of Halloween with Devil Chaos Reigns. So I am super excited about this. I am actually going to be stitching together various different apocrypha from different religions to explain the story of the idea of the devil. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a really fantastic show. So I hope you come. I hope you invite some friends. I'll post some fun, spooky cocktails for us to enjoy together. But mark your calendars. 2 weeks from today, we're going to be diving in deep with the devil. I'm regretting that word choice. All right. Thank you all so much for coming. With that, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you treat yourself with love and respect. May you continue to grow and find the strength to persevere through the painful parts of growth. May you find inspiration all around you. And may you find peace. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining me this week. Bye, y'all.